Welcome to the City Current Show. I'm your host, Jeremy Park. We're always honored to bring you inspiring stories of individuals and organizations making a difference and powering the good. And in this case, we're talking about transportation with Higginbotham. We're honored to be joined by Brent Allred, Transportation Practice Leader and Managing Director with Higginbotham. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely. So let's go ahead and dive in. Before we start with your practice area and transportation, so we'll talk all about logistics and trucking and transportation. Let's start with Higginbotham overall. So give us some background on Higginbotham.
Yeah, so Higginbotham as an organization has been around for 75 years now, so it's a big year for us. As far as transportation is a part of that organization, I would say it's been 20 to 25 years in the making. Obviously, within the last 2 years, they've seen a massive growth in that segment, being that they acquired Lipscomb and Pitts Insurance out of Memphis. Obviously, that's where I come from. So honored to be a part of the journey. And I see the growth trajectory only getting larger from here as we acquire future agencies. So.
Absolutely. When you talk about Higginbotham, Lipscomb and Pitts Insurance, powering everything we do as City Current, obviously there's a long legacy and storyline there as well. And really on the Higginbotham side, you've got, property and casualty, commercial insurance, employee benefits, you have personal lines, and then obviously as we're talking about a specialization within the transportation sector. So talk about what you specialize in, talk about your division.
Absolutely. Yeah. So primarily, we're focused on what are called for-hire motor carriers. So that's going to be most of the trucking companies you see on the road every day if you're driving. Normally, our segment starts at about 25 trucks and up. So we call that fleet in our world. Could be anything that they're hauling. So if it's a flatbed trailer you see on the road, it could be a dry van trailer, refrigerated goods. We see oversized, overweight operations. Anything that needs to get to the end consumer, we can handle in our division. And just outside of those size ramifications that we've set, we're equipped to do a good job for them.
Why is it important to have specialization within that versus traditional property and casualty? So why specialize in this area?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'll start with why I joined this specialty practice. One, if you think about it, goods have to be moved every day. Irregardless of what's going on in the economy, there's still things that have to get from point A to point B. So from my perspective, and I think a lot of others would agree with me on this, is that it's semi-recession proof. That doesn't mean that we don't feel market constraints. So if things are bad in the economy, things are bad everywhere. But there are still trucking companies that have to pick up the slack there, per se. So I think that's one of the big attractive things about being specialized in this arena. The other thing is, the auto sector as a whole has been a very challenging market, and that's been ongoing for the last decade. I don't see that changing, and that's just because of the evolving technologies that we see on the road every day. The cell phone has completely changed the game as far as accident frequency. You just see all new things coming out that are things that we have to tackle and that have not yet been addressed. So while it seems like it's simple, you're just focusing on really one particular exposure. It's an evolving exposure that nobody's mastered, and I don't think anybody will for a long time, especially as we talk now about electric-powered vehicles and self-driving vehicles and how that impacts trucking and logistics in general. So I'm not sure I answered all your questions there, but that's part of why I joined this. It's fun to be a part of all this.
Well, and just as you're talking about the complexity of it, right? So when you talk about all the complexities, the changing nuances, that means, okay, we've got to dive in deep. And when you start diving in deep, that creates the specialization. And so I think that's an important piece. And we'll definitely come back and talk about some of the things that you just mentioned as trends, because I think that's an important piece of this. But I do want to start out with where you like to start out. So when you're sitting down with a company and you're looking at the risk and what they're doing, what are the questions you like to ask? Where do you like to start your conversation?
Yeah, so I treat it simply like getting to know them, right? So how have you been successful so far? People like to talk about themselves, and that's not a bad thing. If they're doing something great, I like to hear what that is and use that to help others as well, that trucking companies that maybe aren't experiencing the same success. So I start there with understanding what they're doing, what's working for them, And then obviously the question that comes after, which is not as popular, is what's not working. We all know there are challenges. An interesting fact, and this I don't think is solely unique to transportation, but it's definitely in a small segment, which is that insurance is a top three expense for these companies every year. Um, the two that rank above them are fuel and payroll. So it's very unique in how we're positioned in that. It's a very sensitive subject to these guys and gals. And obviously, if you can control that cost and make that more of a fourth or fifth cost for that business, that's a huge weapon they can use when they're going out to bring on new business or to look at hauling in different lanes of travel. So it really creates some nimbleness for them there. So I start with that, what's working, what's not working, and then it's understanding what type of products they haul. When you're dealing with insurance companies, they're going to want to know, are you hauling hazardous materials? Could it be that you're hauling refrigerated goods that require certain temperature settings? Are your drivers, the people that you're training to operate these vehicles, are they equipped to handle that? And then you're looking at things like age of equipment, uh, how they're recruiting drivers and retaining drivers, and safety in general. Just what's the general sense that you get when that topic is broached? Is it, do they smile? Are they excited to talk about that? Is that something they're passionate about, or is it something they run and hide from? And I get everything under the sun, so that's okay. We can work with anybody and anything, but obviously prefer the conversations where they smile about safety. So, but that's just a broad scope of what we cover to start.
When you talk about transportation, obviously they're traveling all over the U.S. And so talk about geographical footprint on your end.
Yeah, so this is kind of exciting. As a part of joining the Higginbotham family a few years ago, this has really opened us up into markets that we could have worked on in the past or been or have prospected in, I'll call it. The challenges being though that we didn't have a geographic presence there, so it's hard to give that service that they all desire, that we feel like we need to be able to offer to do business with them. So being that Higginbotham has about 70 offices now, and that's growing every day, so I'm sure that stat is off by the end of this call. But we are able to go into markets now like Texas, New Mexico, Colorado, Missouri, Oklahoma, some of those southwestern states and Midwest states that were a little far reach for us. We primarily operated out of Tennessee, Arkansas, Alabama, Kentucky, Georgia, some of the main Southeast corridor. So it's been exciting for us because the challenges exist everywhere. But what we find is how things are rated differently across different states because of different laws that are set there. So, and I don't want to say this is always the case, but a wreck in Texas is likely more costly than a wreck may be in Tennessee. So you'll see insurance companies rate trucking companies very differently depending on where they're located geographically, which creates some opportunity for us. If we can help the people that are paying for the sins of where they choose to live, obviously that's something I'm passionate about trying to overcome for them. Because that's, to me, I feel like that's the beauty of living in the United States, having freedom and choice. And we don't want insurance rates to determine that. So, but yeah.
Yeah. When you talk about Rusty Reed, CEO of Higginbotham, talks a lot about the day two services and really being able to do kind of what you're talking about, which is dive in and really help on a lot of different fronts. And so it starts one area, but then let's really look at the big picture. And so talk about some of the differentiation, some of those elements like you're talking about, where it's like, okay, we can really help in a lot of places.
Absolutely. I would second to what he's probably already said to you before, which is this is really our secret sauce and what I think really provides a unique offer to the customers we work with. Particularly in transportation, we've developed some products and strategies there that are not necessarily deployed across other specialty practices that we have. So an example of that would be folks within the day two service arena have specialties in Department of Transportation regulations. So it may be they start there by looking at what challenges are they having at scale houses as they travel from state to state? What can we do to educate them to avoid those from happening in the future? Another thing that we can do is on the claims front, which is still part of day two services. As we all know, that's why you buy insurance, is for a good claims experience. When a bad day happens, you want the best outcome from that, right? So we've actually deployed some resources there that are give a little extra attention to those claims to ensure there's better communication, which hopefully leads to better outcomes when that occurs. So that's just a quick snippet of that. I would add one other thing to that I find very important in what I do, which is we have a software program we use that really allows us to get into the weeds as far as the submission that we send to the insurance companies, which what a submission is really at the end of the day is it's the story you're telling on the trucking company you're sending to them. The more information and detail we can provide there, the better we're telling the story. And that could be the difference between somebody saying yes to that opportunity or no, which the law of large numbers or whatever saying you want to use for this, the more you get to the table, typically the cost comes down, right? The more competition that's created. Not always, but my experience has been such. So we're really proud of what we're doing. We're working on some other products as well that aren't ready to be released to the public yet. I don't work for the CIA, but I feel like I do at times. So, but yeah, we're continuing to stay ahead of the curve and trying to make sure we bring cutting edge resources to these folks because they're trusting us with a top 3 expense. We want to make sure they feel like we're good stewards of that.
You mentioned some of the trends earlier in terms of electric vehicles, self-driving trucks. What are some of those trends like that? And you can either elaborate on those or kind of carry some other ones forward. But what are some of the trends that have your attention right now?
So obviously the one that's specific to trucking that is really a concern right now is parking, actually. There's a limited amount of that. And so when you talk about autonomous vehicles, you talk about supply chain issues that we've experienced, all of us as in consumers, the last 2 years at least. You think about what issues need to be addressed before those can become a reality. Truck parking is one of them. It's a massive issue. Another issue that we've run into in some reports and studies that have come out are the amount of power that electric vehicles of that size require to operate. So these supercharging stations that they need to actually be up and ready to go every day. We've seen a report in Joplin, Missouri, where there was a trucking company there. They'll go aforementioned here, but they had 50 supercharging stations. They went to the city to get approved to put into their terminal there. And a study showed that the amount of amperage those were pulling just for 50 of those charging stations totaled the entire city of Joplin, Missouri. So there's some challenges with these technologies that I think we're a ways off from actually being able to offer widespread. But I back up to truck parking as something as minuscule as that has become such a problem that I feel like our attention is focused more on those items now and what we can do to help be a part of the solution there. I'll go into something that's kind of answering your question here, what we're doing in response to that. I myself am serving on a research advisory committee for American Transportation. Basically, they give an opportunity every couple of years to have industry professionals submit their credentials, and they select folks that are appointed by the board of directors. So I'm happy to say I'll be serving on that in starting March of this year. And a lot of what we do are to address top industry concerns that come up that are sent in and submitted on behalf of transportation companies and drivers. So we listen to what they're saying are the cutting edge things to look into, and then we give them the people that do the work the resources to be able to research those things that hopefully provide either legislative initiatives or some kind of resource or solution that we can bring. So it's cool to be a part of it. I'm in the inside know now what's coming, and it'll be interesting to see what topics get brought up here in March.
Very cool indeed. How has this changed your perspective of logistics, transportation, intermodality? Like how has all of this changed your perspective now working in this industry?
Yeah, I smile when I answer this because obviously I have a wife and a family, and so we travel frequently just to do vacation or whatever it is. And every time we go down the road, I have such a different understanding and respect for the man or woman that's next to me. What I think people don't intentionally overlook but don't understand is the sacrifices these people give up to have that career. It's a lot of time away from home. It's a very demanding job. It's set by time is your worst enemy in that business. So anything they can do to make up time, whether that be sacrificing something like we would never take for granted, going to the bathroom, or something like that, or skipping a lunch or a meal because they have to make up time. Those are the sacrifices those men and women make for us to ensure we get goods on time, which allows the economy to function. And then I look at the C-suite level folks there and where they come from and their backgrounds. And what's interesting is most of them learned from their parents this business. So it's very family centered, which I like. And you feel like you're kind of a part of that family story when you start working with them because you're a big part of keeping them in business every year. So they definitely look at you as a partner. And if they don't, they can call me because I'd be glad to help. You got a problem there if you don't see insurance as your friend. So, but yeah, that's how it's changed my perspective. Just understanding the demands of that job, and I think it gets overlooked sometimes with the mind-numbing clicks that we put on an Amazon app or something. We don't understand what it takes to actually get that there in the 2 days we promise it's going to be there. So.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the personal aspect of that. I think that's extremely important, that perspective. So wrap up with where do we go to carry this conversation forward? So website, email, where do we go to connect in and learn more about Higginbotham and obviously your specialization?
Yeah, so a couple of forums here. We can email me directly at ballred@higginbotham.net. My last name is spelled Allred. And then obviously you can visit our website for more information. There is a link to get to the transportation segment there. It's higginbotham.com. And then anything outside of that, feel free to go through me. I can share additional resources, information I covered here today. Happy to pass that along.
Well, Higginbotham makes it very easy. You can go to higginbotham.com or higginbotham.net. Either one will get you to the right place. Brent Allred, thank you for all you and your amazing team do. Thank you for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I enjoyed it.